So this is the build guide for my chieftain from 3.7, and I will also be making it again in 3.9. It is a chieftain, and its primary skill is volatile dead. We are going to do that through cast while channeling linked to a cyclone. Our supports are going to be concentrated effect, combustion, and immolate. Controlled destruction gives us a little more damage as far as that's concerned, but it makes it very hard to crit, and I use elemental overload, so that doesn't really work. We are going to keep corpses going for volatile dead through cast and damage taken, linked to a desecrate and a spell cascade support for maximum corpses, as well as cast and damage taken with unearth with greater multiple projectiles and volley support, so we get lots of corpses. We are going to trigger those corpses using the Eye of Innocence. Take 100 fire damage when you ignite an enemy. We're going to ignite very often. Between the Eye of Innocence giving 10% chance to ignite, Razor of the Seventh Sun giving 25%, and Combustion giving another 50% chance. Right there we have 85, but we get a little bit more on the tree to take us over 100%. So every time that our Volatile Dead or our Cyclone hits an enemy, we will ignite them. If we are dodging around and not being hit by the Eye of Innocence, we're going to want to spam some corpses anyway. So we're going to use this Scepter. Socketed gems are supported by level 20 Spell Cascade, which will support our Desecrate to create as many corpses as possible. We'll also have Unearth linked to greater multiple projectiles. Now, how are we going to spam this if we are holding down our Cyclone the whole time? Well, that's simple. We are going to use Plague Bearer. We don't have much mana regen, so we're going to find a way to keep our mana cost down. As you can see here, it's free. It's also an instant, very important, so we don't have to stop cycloning. I have this ring, which has an old craft on it, which you can't get anymore, which is -6 to total mana cost of skills. That's okay, I double checked. We can put a non-channeling one and a channeling one to decrease the cost of our cyclone, and we can cyclone all day long and cast Plague Bearer all day long with nothing happening. So, those are our main skills. Let's see, what else do we have supporting it? I have Flame Dash and Righteous Fire. I only use the Ball Righteous Fire version. The regen is too helpful defensively to not be running Righteous Fire. Flame Dash, it's just a movement skill. Use whatever you want. Here, connected to my cast and damage taken, is also Wave of Conviction, just to increase our damage. Over here, we use Immortal Call with cast and damage taken. That is just a little bit more defense. Anger, Herald of Ash, those are the auras that are going to give us the most damage. Going into the items, we've got our Razor of the Seventh Sun. We use this primarily for the recover 1% of life when you ignite an enemy, but the ignite chance is also very helpful. We use the Eye of Innocence, as I already explained. It's about taking that damage when we ignite an enemy, as well as that 10% chance to ignite. The third item that's very important is a Scepter, which is supported by level 20 Spell Cascade, as well as crafting on trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill. Any additional spell, fire, area damage, or elemental damage is very helpful. We also use Devato's Devotion for movement speed and dexterity. I tried using Starkonja's, but the movement speed was just too helpful, even though Starkonja's gave me more life. Rare rings, main thing is life and resistances needed to cap our resistances. Body armor, life, resistances, that's what's important. Gloves, life, resistance that you need. This one happens to have 49 to 76 added fire damage against burning enemies. It's very helpful against bosses. Most non-bosses are gone quick enough that it's not a big deal. Belt, looking at life and any resistance we need. I crafted cooldown recovery here. It was pretty helpful for our cast when damage takens, our triggering a socketed spell when we use a skill. Cast while channeling is not a cooldown, it is a set time, so it does not help there. And on my boots, it's life, movement speed, resistance that is needed. I crafted on cannot be frozen. Very helpful. As far as the flasks are concerned, I have 2 magic flasks. One is a quicksilver to help me move faster, as well as of staunching to stop bleeding. Then I have a sulfur flask of warding. The warding is important. I use sulfur flask because it gives a little bit of damage. You can see I do not use a life flask here because compared to how much life I have and how much I regain life, it just is, a flask is no good. Aziris for damage, Wise Oak for damage. Cinder Swallow gives you onslaught for faster movement speed. Enemies ignited by you during flask effect take 10% increased damage. That's pretty helpful. As well as some regen, which is fairly helpful also, but not such a big deal. Let's go ahead and look at the tree. Going to our ascendancy, we take a chieftain. Why do we take chieftain? Fire penetration, chance to ignite, covering enemies in ash, and fire damage leech here. Strength is nice, but it's really just life. 10% of physical damage from hits taken as fire damage. That is good, and 50% increased life recovery rate if you've taken fire damage from an enemy hit recently. Which means that when we are hit by physical damage, we are going to increase our life recovery rate quite a bit, which is helpful because this build is built around being moderately good at damage, pretty good speed, and very tanky. The last ascendancy node is chance to gain an endurance charge when you use a fire skill. But we don't do that very much because the volatile dead is triggered, so it's not actually considered to be using it. Increased physical damage per endurance charge, increased fire damage per endurance charge. It's not terribly helpful, but you know, whatever. We got 2 more points. What are we going to do with them? I guess that doesn't help at all. So there's just not much to do with other nodes there. We are going to run endurance charges. We sustain them using these 2 nodes here that each give us a 10% chance to gain an endurance charge. We take a couple endurance charges here, one here, one here, just to keep up plenty of endurance charges, total of 6. Basically on the tree, my biggest focus was life, because as I showed on that Razor of the 7th Sun, we gain 1% of our total life every time we ignite an enemy, which is very rapidly. We also leech 1% of fire damage to stay alive, and we regen a little over 1200 life without any endurance charges. It goes up significantly with endurance charges. I would have to check Path of Building to see exactly what it is. Other important things is getting some fire and elemental damage here, here, and here. And then all the jewels have things like life, fire damage, elemental damage, spell damage, area damage, stuff like that. They all have some life on them though. And then I use a Watcher's Eye for damage penetration while affected by anger. I will leave a Path of Building to show exactly what tree I'm using. It'll probably change in 3.9 because of changes that will be coming. And that is the end of the guide. I am just going to go ahead and run a map. It's a colonnade map, nothing too spectacular on it, but just to show how it does in playstyle. So let's give it a go. This build is really good for people who play distracted a lot or just aren't very good at Path of Exile because it moves pretty fast, it deals decent damage, and it is very tanky with 6 endurance charges, 1700 life regenerated per second. The annoying clicking sound is the wheel on my mouse. That is what I use to cast Plague Bearer all the time. There you go.
Still sane, Exile?
Alright, so that's pretty much the end of the map. Thanks for watching my guide, and hope to see you in the game.